Sandra, welcome to Creating Spain, and today I'm doing a little video with Shortcut Slot version 4. Now, a lot of people who are doing crafting, making cards and things have a liking for using stamps, rubber stamps or acrylic stamps or polymer stamps, something of that type. But not everyone has a full collection of dies to cut those stamps out. Now, if you've got your own cutting machine and you don't make use of this, then you're not really making use of your cutting machine to its fullest extent. There are several different ways that you can make dies, or die cuts I should say, or cuts for your stamps. And what I'm going to do is show you one of the simplest. Now, all I've done is I've gone into Shortcut Slot and I've imported an image which was basically an A4 piece of paper with some stamps on it. Stamps I'd made and I just stamped onto the paper and scanned into my computer. Now this is what I automatically came up with, haven't adjusted anything on here at all. But what I would suggest that you do is go to the break apart outlines and click that particular one. And then you can click OK. Now you'll notice that I have some different results on here depending on what I've actually stamped. What I'm going to do is to select the entire lot, make it a lot easier to understand by going to the colours and taking all the colour out of the fill, because it doesn't matter to me whether a shape is filled or not filled. I just need to see the lines because it's the cut line that I want. Now you noticed I've done 2 girls and 2 flowers. This flower was stamped as is and scanned as is, that's it. But because I'd made a stamp that had a very fine outer line and in places the line is broken, and this was quite deliberate on my part, I wanted broken lines on the stamp. It doesn't make for a very good trace for obvious reasons. I can't just select the outer line of this, even though it's broken apart, and take it away, because the outer line is actually part of a bigger picture, as it were. It's not just a solid outer line. If it were, I could cut it out anyway, but it isn't. So what I did was, ignore that, you go to fit to window again. What I did with the original stamp, before I actually scanned it, I got a bullet nib marker and I just went around in black on the inside of the lines. Now you see this one and this one where I did the same thing, I have effectively given myself a really easy object to trace, and that's it, done, dusted, not a problem. Now I've got this image here, I'm just going to remove these. Ta-da. And I'm going to remove the 2 girls. Get those out of the way so we can concentrate on the other ones. In fact, I'm just going to take this out as well. Okay, so now we can zoom in and we can see there's going to be a bit of a problem with this chain one that I've done. Now it seemed to stamp okay, it looked alright when I stamped it on the paper. It was fine. I think ink is relatively forgiving when it goes on the polymer. It does its job, it spreads. But the actual cut file, now that's a different matter. That will be a bit ropey. Now, if I select this and I make sure it's all broken apart, I can do something about this. First of all, I can remove those little bits there that I obviously don't want. I can take these here and I can group them. Okay, so I can take those and I can group them, I can move them somewhere else. What I'm going to do is take this outer line here and move it out the way. Now instead of just dragging and dropping it, I'm going to do that with the keys on my keypad. And I'm just going to move it up and count the steps that I move it. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There we go, that's done. And now I can work on this one without interrupting with these, without interfering with them. So this particular one, I want to make sure that the path is closed. Okay, so I've done that, and then I should be able to get my brush. Now I am really bad at using the brush on this. I'm absolutely dreadful at it, but you'll get the general gist. To repair the bits that need repairing. I think I need a bit more on there. Now, oh dear, I definitely didn't do that very well, did I? You can, of course, zoom in and make this a bit easier on yourself. I'm not doing it at the moment. Make you go dizzy doing all that zooming in on it. There we go. Okay. So then we take the whole lot and we go to Path Union. And it would repair the thing. Now, I have done it extremely badly. I'll be the first to say that. I have done it very badly. But it's done. So then all I need to do is go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I've got my object back. And then select all of it, go to Path and go to Exclude. And now this is my completed object, my completed cut line. Now, if I want to add a shadow when I'm cutting, if I don't want it to cut the precise size, I can add a shadow. If I don't want it to cut these pieces here, I can take it apart, I can break it apart and remove them. So it depends on what you actually want to do. You might want to cut the strip as is, like so. But if you want to make a shadow, you don't have to alter this object. There is another way of doing it. What you can do is when you go to the cut selections, you see you've got cut line type here, cut, but up here you've got styled. Now this says normal, but you can have things like a shadow blackout. And if you do that, that's what it's going to cut. You can alter the size of your shadow, so you can have it smaller or bigger as you wish, or you could just have it shadow rounded, and that will put the shadow on the inside holes as well. The blackout stops all the things which are inside from being shadowed. It basically gives you one large object, as it were. And whatever you apply in this cut setting is merely temporary. It's just while you are doing your cut. When you close your file down, when you go back to use it the next time, your object is as it was before. It hasn't been altered. So if it's something that you use and you want to make sure that you don't change the actual file itself by accident, then just put the shadow on in the style section of the cut box, and that's the easier way of doing it. Now, going to go back to Fit to Window. I'm going to remove this one. Now, the birthday wishes. If we zoom in here, whoops, slightly more zoomed in than I anticipated. Okay, let's move this down. I think I need to zoom out a little bit. So, view, zoom out. Okay, let's go back to Fit to Window, it's quicker. Okay, I'll just make this bigger. Okay, so we have our birthday, wishes. So I've got my mouse active, but it's on a piece of paper at the moment. There we go, we have our birthday wishes. Now if we preview this, we can see what the cut lines are going to be. Now if you're doing any stamping and cutting out for sentiments, then I strongly suggest that you check that your sentiments are joined up in the stamp. If they're not, make sure that you put a shadow on them, because if you don't, you're going to end up with bits and pieces that make a right untidy mess. But the other thing to bear in mind is that in this same box where we have the style for the cutting and we can put our shadow on, so we can say put a blackout shadow on there. It will do it in a minute, there we go. It looks a bit of a mess, but if you go to weld and then you go to preview, you find that it's actually stopping you from cutting out all the little silly bits that you shouldn't be cutting out. So that is a useful thing to know. But the main thing to take away from this exercise is that if you're going to try and make a cut file for your stamp, and it is not a strong, dark edge that you have on your stamp, if it is broken or if it's a very fine edge, or if it's, I mean, if you were doing something like, I don't know, a firework maybe, obviously that would have lots of individual little pieces, they wouldn't be easily traced, then your best bet is to go over the image, the inside line of the image that you want with a bullet point marker, and then you'll make it so much easier for yourself to trace it. Now there are alternatives. If I want to trace something and I know it's going to be a real nasty thing to trace, what I'm inclined to try and do is to do it by hand, but not quite by hand if you follow my meaning. I have an iPad and I use two different programs largely on my iPad these days for artistic use. One is called Concepts, and you can actually import your image into Concepts, and you can use a stylus to physically draw around your image and do it that way. And the other one is called Procreate, and you can do the same type of thing with that. Neither app is particularly expensive, but they are both very good. Procreate has in fact just today had a new update, which is absolutely wonderful, and I shall be using that quite a bit in the future for doing things like sentiments, because one of the things that they put in the Procreate update is a line smoothing. So if, for example, you're using a fountain pen on Procreate as a tool, it will smooth it for you so you don't get the jagged lines and things that you get if you do anything by hand. It's not usually perfectly smooth, but if you use a smoothing function, you can smooth that out. That is the main reason that I would use Procreate for things like sentiments, for writing things, because I like to do my sentiments in my own handwriting, for example. The other thing that I tend to use Procreate for is for items that I want to, like spray paint. I don't know if you're familiar with things like Corel and was it photo paint and all these sorts of things, where you can spray paint images. Adobe has something very similar as well, but where you spray paint images and you can literally draw something or import something and make it into a spray tool, and those are wonderful fun, and I do love doing that, so I tend to use it for that as well. So the difference from my point of view for using the apps, Procreate has a lot of brushes, that are in there already, and you can make your own brushes. Concepts is more of a linear design and hand drawing, but it doesn't concentrate on the brushes. It has pens, pencils, dotted lines, it has line smoothing and so on and so forth, but it's not good for calligraphy. That it's not particularly good for. It's good for all other things, but not for calligraphy. So I do tend to split my usage between the two. So there we go. I hope you found this useful. And for anyone who's watching in the States, or anyone who is American who's not watching in the States, have a very happy day today on American Independence Day. Take care now. Bye bye.